At 1:59 a.m., 9 hikers were alive inside their tent on a remote Russian mountain. Hours later, they were dead. Their tent had been sliced open from the inside. Their jackets and boots were left behind. Their footprints led away into the snow, but not all of them were wearing shoes. They walked into temperatures cold enough to kill a person within minutes. Something happened on that mountain that night. And after more than 60 years, nobody can say with absolute certainty what it was. Before the mystery, before the headlines, before the unanswered questions, they were simply a group of young explorers chasing an adventure. In January 1959, 10 university students from the Soviet Union set out on what was supposed to be a challenging but ordinary winter expedition through the remote Ural Mountains. They were not beginners. They were experienced hikers, trained in survival, and prepared for one of the harshest environments on Earth. Their goal was simple: cross the frozen wilderness, document their journey, and return home. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a skilled skier and respected expedition leader. Alongside him were Zinaida Kolmogorova, Yuri Doroshenko, and several other experienced hikers. But one member of the team would never reach the final campsite. Days into the journey, Yuri Yudin became seriously ill and made the difficult decision to turn back. It was a choice that unknowingly saved his life. He would become the only member of the expedition to return from the mountains alive. The others continued deeper into the wilderness, toward a mountain they would never leave. As the expedition moved deeper into the Ural Mountains, the hikers reached a remote and dangerous area known as Kholat-Syakhl, a mountain whose name is often translated as Dead Mountain. On the evening of February 1st, 1959, the group made a decision that would later become one of the biggest mysteries in modern history. Instead of camping in a more sheltered area, they set up their tent on the exposed slope of the mountain. Inside that tent, everything appeared normal. Their final journal entries showed no signs of fear or panic. They wrote about the journey, made jokes, and recorded ordinary details of their adventure. They had food. They had supplies. They had shelter. Nothing suggested that this would be their final night alive. But sometime after they settled in, something changed. In the middle of the frozen night, 9 experienced hikers made a decision that would make no sense to investigators decades later. They abandoned their tent, and they ran into the darkness. Weeks passed before search teams finally reached the last known location of the hikers. What they found on that frozen slope immediately raised more questions than answers. The tent was still there, partially buried in snow, standing against the wind, but clearly disturbed. It had been torn open from the inside, as if whoever was inside felt they had no time to use the entrance. Inside, the scene made even less sense. Warm clothing was still folded or lying in place. Essential survival gear had not been taken. Even boots were left behind, as if there had been no time to dress properly. But the most disturbing detail was the direction of escape. Footprints led away from the tent into the open mountain, showing that the group had left in a hurry, dressed for almost nothing in subzero conditions. Some were even barefoot or wearing only socks. This was not a slow evacuation. It was a sudden departure into conditions that would normally be fatal within minutes. Investigators were left with a single, chilling question. What could force 9 experienced hikers to abandon shelter, warmth, and survival itself in the middle of a deadly winter night? The search continued deeper into the frozen wilderness, with rescuers following the faint trail left behind by the hikers. What they found next shifted the case from a missing person search into something far more disturbing. Near a cedar tree, several hundred meters from the abandoned tent, the first bodies were discovered. The scene suggested a desperate attempt to survive. Burned branches, signs of a small fire, and evidence that at least some of the group had tried to stay alive through the night. But survival had failed. As the search expanded, more bodies were found scattered across the snow between the cedar tree and the campsite. The pattern suggested they had split up or collapsed at different points during their attempt to return. The official findings added another layer of confusion. Some victims died from hypothermia, consistent with exposure to extreme cold. Others, however, had severe internal injuries, including skull and chest fractures that were difficult to explain given the lack of external trauma. Even more unsettling were early reports of missing soft tissue in some cases, including eyes and parts of the face. Later forensic explanations attributed this to natural decomposition in harsh environmental conditions, but the details still fueled speculation for decades. There was no clear evidence of an external attacker, no definitive cause that could unify all the injuries, only a fragmented pattern of death across a frozen landscape. And with each new discovery, the question only grew darker. What force could scatter 9 experienced hikers across a mountain and leave behind injuries that did not fully match any single known explanation? Theories behind the mystery. Over the years, investigators and researchers have put forward several explanations, each attempting to make sense of what happened on that frozen mountain. But none have fully closed the case. Avalanche theory. One of the most widely discussed explanations is that a rare type of avalanche or sudden snow slab collapse forced the hikers to escape their tent in panic. In this version of events, the weight of snow above the tent may have created an immediate threat, leaving the group with no choice but to cut their way out and flee. Some details appear to support this idea. The exposed position of the campsite, harsh mountain conditions at the time, later interpretations suggesting signs of snow movement in the area. However, critics argue that the slope does not clearly match typical avalanche conditions. They also point out that the hikers' behavior and the distribution of injuries do not fully align with a standard avalanche scenario. Infrasound theory. Another explanation focuses on an invisible force rather than a physical one. Researchers have suggested that under specific atmospheric conditions, strong low-frequency sound waves could form around the mountain. The theory proposes that these infrasound vibrations may have caused extreme fear, confusion, or panic among the group, potentially explaining the sudden evacuation from the tent. While scientifically interesting, this theory remains speculative and has not been proven in relation to the incident. Military involvement theory. Some theories point toward possible military activity in the region during the Cold War period. Witnesses in nearby areas reportedly described unusual glowing lights in the sky around the time of the incident, leading some to speculate about tests or secret operations. The remote location and Soviet-era secrecy have also fueled these suspicions. However, no verified evidence has ever confirmed military involvement, and official investigations have not supported this explanation. The combination of unexplained injuries, strange reported lights, and the sudden, chaotic escape from the tent has also led to more unconventional interpretations. These theories suggest forces beyond current scientific understanding, though none of them are supported by verified evidence or official findings. More than 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass incident still stands as one of the most unsettling mysteries ever recorded. The hikers were not inexperienced or unprepared. They knew the risks, they understood the terrain, and they followed survival principles. Yet something caused them to abandon their shelter in the middle of a freezing night and walk into conditions that no human could easily survive. The official explanation offers one answer, but it does not silence every question. And so the mountain keeps its secret. Frozen in time.